everybody in Progress Report land. This is the first, it's the first day of February, also the first Wednesday of February, which means I have the great privilege of having my good friend and distinguished colleague here, Senator Lou D'Alessandro, the Dean of the Senate, just elected again last fall. And Lou has brought a terrific guest for us tonight, Charlie McIntyre. He runs our legal gaming operations in the state of New Hampshire, the lottery, and a whole bunch of other stuff. And I know less about this than I'm going to know after this hour tonight. I'd like to remind everybody we are live. You can call in at 603-640-3091. And also that we are now up on YouTube and Instagram, and that will mean this show will be available everywhere about within 24 hours after we wrap it up here at 8 o'clock tonight. But at the moment, I'm anxious to get going because the history of gambling in New Hampshire, by the way, it's a myth we don't have gambling, and we got a lot of gambling in New Hampshire, a lot, and I'm sure we'll get into that. But I was just sharing with Charlie, I remember, back in the late 60s when Governor John King was here, New Hampshire became the very first state to set up a state-run lottery. I guess a couple of short-lived examples in the Reconstruction states in the South. But other than that, this was the first state. New Hampshire likes to be first in things, and we were the first to have a state-run lottery. It was a tremendous battle to get over much opposition, including from the federal government. And that was the start of our state-supported lotteries and associated games, whether it's Keno, sports betting, all those things. We got them all. And the only thing we don't have, and Lou's going to wince when I say this, we never did go to a full casino authorization. That was a battle fought year in and out, every session of the legislature. And every year Lou was pushing for a casino, and every year the forces came together. But I think that all that really means is we have pretty much everything in the state of New Hampshire except slot machines. I think that's right. But anyhow, Charlie, thanks for coming down and joining us. Really looking forward to having you be here with us.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. It's a real pleasure. I love my job. I love what I do. As I told you off air, that I was previously an organized crime prosecutor. So I joke I used to be the scourge of bookies till I became one. So I've enjoyed the time here. I've gotten to know Senator D'Alessandro very well since literally the first week on the job here.
Yeah.
And I've never regretted the move. I came from Boston,
yeah.
And so I moved up here 13 years ago, and I've never looked back, and
yeah.
I'll never leave. So
tell us a little bit more about your background. I know you were a prosecutor, you've been a lawyer, a trial lawyer,
sure.
And you had also experience with in other states and regulated gaming, don't you?
Sure, yeah. So I started my practice at law, graduated law school, became a frontline assistant district attorney in Massachusetts for a county of about 1 million people. Worked my way up. And I finished as the head of Special Investigations Unit, which is at the time a task force of local and state police officers, and a couple of prosecutors. And there were times we would do cases with the federal government, and there are times we would ignore their very existence. If you follow the trials and tribulations of Mr. Bulger and Mr. Connolly in the movie The Departed, and et cetera, there were times when I wouldn't tell the federal government I was in their backyard. And that was sadly the case for a number of years. We would just, if the criminals knew how little we talked, they would have really run amok. And so then a dear friend of mine became state treasurer of Massachusetts, and he needed a chief lawyer for the lottery. So I became general counsel of the Massachusetts Lottery for 7 years, which was at the time the biggest lottery in the country, the 8th biggest in the world. And this job opened up. And my wife, who went to Dartmouth, loved the state. And there's a little known fact that the original funding for Dartmouth came from a lottery. In fact,
there's a little known fact. I certainly didn't know.
In fact, New Hampshire held 14 separate state lotteries to fund at the time when Dartmouth was in Portsmouth. And I'm actually happy to send you the tickets. I have several of them. It was a fact my wife didn't know. And so...
well, my son's a Dartmouth guy. I'm going to ask him if he knew this.
Yeah, no, it's... they don't promote it now, certainly. But we moved here, and I started very early, very young, very new, and have been here for 13 years and have loved most of the moments I have been here. And we've grown the place pretty significantly, tried to do it with ethics and integrity and responsibly. But I've enjoyed my time here.
Okay. Lou?
Well, Charlie, welcome again. Welcome to the program, and great to have you in New Hampshire. I've worked with you for a long period of time, really, since you came here. And as Bob said, I was the prime sponsor of a expanded gaming bill, the casino bill, for 20 years. I worked on it for 20 years. So, okay, we never got it. We lost by one vote in the House, passed the Senate, lost by one vote in the House, and Nada Kane voted against us. I called her Lina Kane because of the
I was there that day,
I
Jalil.
mean, I was truly crushed. But anyway, it is what it is, and we are today where we are today. So the lottery itself, originally it was a bet on a horse race.
Correct.
And you had to buy the ticket, you had to sign the ticket,
Yep.
you couldn't keep the ticket.
Yeah.
And Wide World of Sports broadcast the first sweepstakes race out of Rockingham Park.
Yeah.
It was an unbelievable event, a national event, and that was the beginning.
Yeah, we still have the clips. We saved it. We have reams and books of articles. And I think I've told you the story. The Saturday Evening Post wrote an article about how immoral and corrupt New Hampshire had become, and that it was to our doom that we had started a lottery on the sweepstakes.
Well, I remember it well. John King was a good friend of mine and a wonderful, wonderful guy. One of the few who was governor and also Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. And actually, he built the court up on the hill where it is today. That was the location he picked for the court. So, getting into the basics, we have the lottery. The lottery originally starts with the ticket. It's a race.
Yeah.
Then it morphs into the ticket, all
Yep.
right, and then it moves to the $10 ticket and the $25 ticket.
So there's
a progression.
There's a progression, yeah. So it certainly starts with a sweepstakes ticket on the
Yes,
horses, right?
right.
And the reason that was started is because the illegal numbers racket was based off of the races.
Yes, right.
So the illegal numbers game
Right.
was the first 4 races of the day. And so those 4 races. And so the wise guys, certainly in Boston,
Right.
used to fix the races in Boston and then bet their own numbers in their own illegal numbers game. And so they would collect from winning on the races, and then they would collect from winning on their own illegal numbers game. And as I say, you can't blame them for being smart, you know?
Right.
And so that started, and then we started with scratch tickets.
Yes,
And then in '86, we started with Tri-State Megabucks.
Yes.
Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire.
yes,
The original governor, Sununu, signed the bill, a compact, which was the first of its kind.
right. And obviously that has grown into what is now called Powerball.
Yeah.
All right, and then that has become what the second or third largest lottery in the world.
Yeah.
And look at the numbers that's produced.
I got to tell you, can I just
Yeah,
cite a
please.
quote that I'm remarkably proud of? New Hampshire currently, over the last number of years, has grown to be the #1 lottery in North America for Powerball sales per capita. We're the #1,
Yeah.
top state in the U.S. So
Amazing.
yeah,
I mean, with a population of 1.3 million.
Yeah.
When you think of the other
Yeah.
states. So that's the side of the lottery that I think has been under your control and has grown quite dramatically.
yeah,
All of a sudden, a new feature was offered in the gaming world, and it was called charitable gaming.
yes,
And charitable gaming has now become a centerpiece for gaming here in the state of New
sure.
Hampshire.
Obviously you know better than I the sort of the origin of that.
Yes, I do.
It was a separate commission, separate entity that was charged with running racing.
Right.
And since racing became sort of, I don't want to say obsolete, but certainly was dying.
Yes.
It exists really only in Kentucky and Florida and California to any
Right.
large measure. They needed something else to sort of maintain existence, and they took over bingo.
Right.
And they grew from there.
Well, and then you would go to the charitable gaming area of the Attorney General's office, and you would get a permit to run a charitable gaming night. And in those days, it was a one-night situation.
Yeah.
You usually held it at a restaurant or some other assembly area, and the proceeds would go to a charity.
Yeah.
Basically, it was unrestricted.
It's like raffles are now.
Right.
You get a permit from the town for a raffle. I don't want to say it's unregulated, but no one's watching. Did you give the golf clubs away?
Right,
Did
right.
you? It's sort of a scout's honor.
Right. So it grew out of that situation to what it is today.
Yes.
And as I drive up the highway the F.E. Everett Turnpike, and I look at that huge sign, and it says Concord Casino. I'm just I'm amazed when I see Concord Casino. And then I drive up Main Street in Concord, and I see a truck parked on the side of the road that says Concord Casino, and then the windows of what is a local establishment says Concord Casino, and that's the Concord Casino.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the growth and development of the casinos that now exist in New Hampshire, and they are licensed entities.
Yes, they are.
All right. They perform charitable gaming.
Correct.
Charitable gaming gives 35. Bob Odell and I worked on this for a number of years. 35% goes to the charity.
Yes.
Charity gets so many nights.
Correct.
And the games go on. So, as we're moving down this path, all of a sudden, charitable gaming says, well, we've got roulette, we've got cards, we've got these new machines.
Yes.
They're not slot machines.
No.
But they resemble a slot machine.
I mean, that's the question. So even before that, so if you're talking the sort of the history of it.
Yes.
The early stages of the charitable gambling was very basic and
very basic.
Very amateur.
Yep.
I mean, it was essentially like your basement game
right.
in a hall, in a VFW hall or a Legion
hall.
Or just a church hall, right?
Sure.
I mean, I grew up preparing bingo games in St. Anne's and Quincy.
Right,
so,
sure.
And so each sort of iteration of the bill that moved, that raised the wager amount from $1 to $2, $2 to $4, made it more profitable. And
Sure.
and so the table games became more profitable because a dealer can do about 30 deals an hour, give or take. And so there's a certain math that has to play in to pay somebody $20 an hour plus tips to do that. And so you have to get to a deal of about $4 a bet max. And we're now at 10 for table games.
Right.
And so the charities get 35 cents of every dollar. You do get charged rent on top of that as well. That's in the law. And the charities make a significant amount of money.
Yes.
The places don't make much money off of that, candidly. They do okay, but it's not a lot. I mean, we have the numbers. And you know when I don't want to say inherited that because I didn't inherit anything. We were told to take it over.
Right.
I sent out all records requests and every which way for everybody and sort of nailed down the math on it. But then we also inherited these things called Lucky 7 machines.
Yes.
Which are sort of electronic pull tabs. And if, Bob, you don't know what the Lucky 7 pull tab is, it goes back to sort of Indian gaming. And for years, the courts have recognized that under a law now codified called the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act, that in any jurisdiction that allows gaming, you have to allow the tribal state, sovereign, to do that too as well. And so one of the famous cases is Connecticut. Connecticut had allowed Monte Carlo nights. Once again, similar charitable gambling nights in the Union Hall or the Church
Right.
Hall, and they'd regulated those. And so the tribes, the Mashantucket Pequots, and I forget the name of the folks from the other one, the other tribe in Connecticut, had said, okay, great, we're going to do that too. And so they started doing that. I don't say unregulated, but there was no government oversight because they were their own sovereign. This is their own sovereign land. And so that's how it started. And then they went to pull tabs because states sold these pull tabs, which are little things you break open and see if you won or not.
Right.
And then they found a loophole in the federal law that allowed them to do electronic versions of those. And so that's what we inherited for years. For years we had these.
Well, the pull tabs were introduced into New Hampshire in 1973.
Yeah.
The law passed. Ernie Baca from Derry was the original sponsor of the bill, the pull tab bill. And the pull tabs were usually at the clubs. And in those days, we had a multitude of clubs. A multitude of clubs. And over the bar, you were selling the pull tabs. And the pull tabs were 50 cents in those days. It was a 50-cent ticket. Now it's risen to a $1 ticket. And
who knows more?
And it's made a few more tricks. But out of the pull tabs and out of the bingo that used to be in the church hall, all of a sudden an evolution came. And the evolution is called charitable gaming. Now, the charitable gaming requires a license.
requires multiple licenses. It requires a multitude of licenses up and down. It requires an overall facility license. It requires a games of chance license. It requires each of the individuals within the facility to be licensed. It requires the cage operator. I mean, there's a bunch of them. Yeah, yeah.
So does the state get any revenue out of charitable gambling to offset the costs?
It does. It does. It gets, depending on what area you're talking about, what vertical, it does get a significant amount of funding. It is not our major funding source, candidly. And one of the reasons, and Senator D'Alessandro was part of this back in 16, that they merged this Racing Gaming Commission with us, was just efficiencies. We have a bunch of investigators, auditors. We had a very large financial department, and we were able to merge them and have them do their jobs more efficiently. We more than doubled the number of investigators and auditors in the field just by basic efficiency. Taking somebody who was doing paperwork, well, I got plenty of folks doing paperwork. Great, let's just skip you, hire you, and we'll go in the field. And so, with the advent and the growth of it, we've tried to maintain a robust regulatory environment. We have an entire compliance department that does nothing but check up on folks.
Yeah. Because at one time we had a racing commission.
Yes.
And we had a lottery commission.
Yeah.
When racing disappeared,
Yeah.
and horse racing, when we had standardbreds basically in the evening, and we had thoroughbreds.
Yeah, your trotters. Yeah.
Trotters in the evening, standardbreds and thoroughbreds at a couple of tracks, a couple of fairs.
Yeah.
The Rochester Fair
Hinsdale.
had racing. Hinsdale had it to some extent.
Yeah.
But the big number was Rockingham
Sure.
Park. So that was the key in terms of thoroughbred racing. Well, as that dissolved and disappeared, the part of a piece of legislation that I sponsored brought the two together.
Yeah.
And we created the Lottery Commission. Yeah. So instead of 7 guys or 8 guys or 8 persons, we ended up with a 3-person Lottery Commission.
Yeah.
And they are the overseers of the lottery.
Yeah.
And under the lottery comes this new entity called Charitable Gaming. So you govern charitable gaming. And charitable gaming now begins to expand. We've looked at your local television the last couple of nights, and there are locations in Manchester. There's a location in Dover, soon to be location in Keene, and other
Sure.
locations.
There's about 8 now that are on the decks.
Yeah, and they feature an array of gaming mechanisms.
Sure.
Right. And in order
So-
to
and they're
attract
by
the
size,
crowd.
and certainly there's some larger, some smaller. I mean, one of the things I try to point out to folks when you talk about gaming and gambling, as you know, the Senator, nature abhors a vacuum, and so when you don't give folks what is most preferable, and the Senator knows this because I was the chief witness for the government when it came to casinos for years. I was
Yes.
the one explaining the bill every time it was I would explain all the technical aspects of the bill and the compliance aspects. Is if you don't give folks what is desired most, which is top tier casino gambling in a machine and
Right.
environment, the next best thing will happen, and so you'll have smaller facilities that have popped up to sort of feed the need of people to gamble, because in most respects people were gambling already before
Yes.
charitable gambling was. It's like sports betting. I mean, people are like, how did sports betting explode? I'm like, it didn't explode. We just took all the bookies' money.
Right.
I often have to check my car before I turn it on because, all that money that was going to illegal bookmaking is now going to the state coffers in large
Right.
measure. And so, we've certainly viewed it as an obligation to do it well and try and maintain
Sure.
integrity.
Sure.
And we do that to the best of our ability.
Right. And as you say, as time goes on, the public demands certain things.
Exactly.
And the public was doing these things underground.
Or going to Oxford or going to
going to
Encore.
Oxford or going to Encore
I mean,
or going to
I
Connecticut.
think we did a
so-
study. We spent a significant amount of time doing a research study, and 20% of the state adults had gone to Foxwoods or Mohegan Sun in a year,
Sure.
and a bunch of them had gone 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 times. Yeah. So they were just driving someplace else to do it.
Right.
I mean, as you know, retail behavior doesn't care about geography, and for that lesson, just look at our liquor stores. I think a significant portion, if not half of our sales, go to out of state because it's a better product, a better
Right.
price.
Exactly. So the the entity begins to grow, and
Yeah.
as it grows, it becomes a little more sophisticated in the offerings that are on the table, the kind of advertising that's done to induce people
Sure.
to join these facilities. But the key component, Charlie, is the word charitable gaming. That has driven the public to be supportive. And you get, we have hearings about this at the State House, and you get overwhelming support. You get police chiefs who come in and support charitable gaming because they have a favorite charity that's associated with this. So the idea of ever diminishing or putting charitable gaming to bed, I think, is a false assumption. It's here to stay.
Yeah.
So how big is charitable gaming
Big.
in New Hampshire?
It's not as big as you'd think. Not as big. It's bigger than it was 2 years ago, certainly. And I'd be lying if I gave you the exact number. 2 years ago, it was about $13 million. I want to say this past year it may have been 24. And so, for example, sports betting is significantly larger in terms of amount wagered than charitable gambling. So this fiscal year, we may cross $1 billion in sports bet in the state.
Just sports betting.
Just sports betting. Now, you have to factor into account, similar to charitable gambling, particularly poker, the amount wagered is not the amount spent. Because if you are a sports bettor and you have $1,000 and you bet $100 a bet, you win, you lose, you win, you lose. Flip a coin 10 times, it'll come heads 5 times, tails 5 times. And so that $1,000 of sports money will last you 40 bets. So really, it's $4,000 of wagering on $1,000. So the net gaming revenue on sports betting is around, this year will be around $60 million. Similar to charitable gambling, if you and I are playing poker and we are of equal skill, we each have a stack of chips of $100, we'll push that, if you have $100, we'll push that $200 back and forth across the table significantly more than the $200 is worth. So really what you're looking for is not the activity, because that's just exercise. I bet 10, you bet 10, you win. I bet 10, you bet 10, I win. It just goes back and forth. The activity itself is in the tens of millions of dollars in the state currently. But it's growing, and the question is, at some point, it hits a saturation point. I don't know what that number is. But the market will determine that pretty quickly.
Well, we're about to be competing with Massachusetts on sports betting, isn't that right? Didn't they
Correct.
Just open up?
They opened up.
And do you foresee that having much impact on the revenues from our sports betting operation?
Certainly the retail, I don't. Everett is about the worst place to get to in Boston. And I say this is a guy who grew up in Boston. It's just not an easy place to get to. In the best of circumstances, let alone with Boston's special brand of traffic. And they keep building. But on the mobile side, we'll see some significant, material. I wouldn't say significant. New Jersey launched before New York. New York went live. New Jersey didn't see much of a drop-off. I wouldn't see any more than 5-10% in terms of, which, candidly, we estimated $10 million in net revenue for sports betting. This year, we're already made $22 million. And that's before the Final Four, the college basketball tournament, which is our biggest event.
Right.
It's because there's so much content, there's so many games on, and there's no hometown favorites.
Right.
Like when Tom Brady won the Super Bowl for the Buccaneers, that cost us $3 million because everybody bet on him. Similarly, when the Buccaneers got ruined by the Cowboys, we made $2 million that night because everybody locally wanted to bet on Tom Brady. And so it ebbs and flows.
Yeah, it ebbs and flows.
Yeah.
I think a key element in the sports betting is no one had any idea of the size of the market.
I consider myself at the very least an expert in it.
Yes.
Like I said, I was an organized crime prosecutor.
Right.
I used to prosecute bookies because bookies had to pay rent to the gangsters.
Right.
And I was trying to chase the bad guys who they were paying rent to. I thought I knew the marketplace. I had no idea. I estimated $400 million was the saturated maximum handle, and we're more than double that now.
Yeah.
So does the sports betting revenue exceed every other forms of gambling in terms of?
No, scratch tickets is number one still, far and
is
away.
really?
No, with no close second. So scratch tickets, it's about $55 million profit to the state from scratch tickets. Powerball is around 26, 25. Sports betting will probably dwarf that this year a little bit. Mega Millions will be around 12, 15. depending on the year. And certainly, I do this. I don't do this too soon because I have to appear before my Senator Dale Sander at some point to do a revenue estimate again, and I don't want to tip my hand as to how much I expect to make yet because I'm not sure. We haven't done it yet. But last year we made about $146 million total, and so more than half of that would have been three things, which would have been scratch tickets, sports betting, and Powerball. And everything else is the rest of it.
How about Keno? How's that fit in?
Keno is it's a small market because it's only in about 400 locations now, most of them bars. It does exceptionally well in bars and taverns in the state, exceptionally well. So we do about $53 million in Keno sales annually. Profitability on it is about $11 million. But one of the things we love about Keno is we engineered the game to have all of the wins, not all of them, most of them, be in the bar. So a bartender sells a ticket or he gets a ticket from the machine and he wins $100. That money circulates in the bar. Bartender gets a tip for $10. He buys another round. He gets dessert. And so there's a number of our retailers who sold Keno. We did a research project through UNH actually. 3/4 of them said that they saw a dramatic increase in the sale of other stuff when they launched Keno. So it was a big help because it was a product that was selling in Massachusetts and not here. And once again, retail behavior doesn't care about geography. And so when I went to Mass, my friends there, $20 million annually was sold to New Hampshire citizens in Keno in Massachusetts. So a lot of the money, the $50 million, is repatriated funds back to the state because I made the same exact game in New Hampshire available here.
And yet there are still some significant communities that haven't opted to allow it, right?
Yeah.
How many? Does the overwhelming number of municipalities in New Hampshire allow it, or
so actually the
where
majority
stand?
don't.
Yeah.
But there's a significant number that we never really asked because nobody lives there.
Yeah.
And early on it was bars and taverns, and so there are whole swaths of land up north that have different names and towns and cities that don't have actually a bar in them. And so I want to say it's 91 cities and towns have approved it out of 220, I think, is total. But it's about 65% of the population has. So Manchester being the biggest, Nashua being second, and so a bunch of those have approved it. And it's been doing well.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, it's part of the lexicon of items that are offered, and I think you have to offer it. But let's get back to the charitable gaming aspect of it, because the venue that has charitable gaming, and charitable gaming, 35% goes to the charity. The charity gets 10 nights, right?
Yes,
Okay.
up to 10 nights. No, they
Up
don't
to
guarantee
10
10 because so it's an odd mix because everybody wants Saturday and Friday. Traffic is way higher. So some of the facilities will do a week and say, okay, everyone gets one day, Monday to Sunday, and you each get a Tuesday, which is not great, and you get a Friday, which is great. And some of the facilities will do, okay, Charity A gets 2 Saturdays and 2 Fridays and 6 days, and some will get only 1 Friday and 1 Saturday. And so it balances out, but the maximum is 10. You're right. It's not everyone does 10.
Right. And we have, the last time I checked, there were about 8,000 registered charities in the state of New Hampshire.
It's a good question. I know I've heard the number. It's a big one. I don't.
It's huge. So there's got to be a process by which you get to be a charity that enters into the charitable gaming pool.
Yeah, but certainly the process. The operators themselves are the ones that seek out the charities in which to fund, essentially. I do know that a number, if not all of the operators, will seek out local charities first for a couple of reasons. One is you want to benefit the community you're in.
Sure.
Second, for business reasons, if you are benefiting Charity A, then the members of Charity A are more likely to go to your facility that night and be a patron.
Right. Sure.
Yeah.
So the new rules allow you to open at 8 o'clock in the morning. Am I correct?
You'd have to. I don't remember. I don't remember. I think they do. I don't know that anyone does.
Right. But
so, like, that's to your question. I think the rules do. I don't know that anyone actually does, Senator.
So, and you can go until what, 2 in the morning?
I think it's 1. But also, that's governed by the town and city as well. Okay. So some cities and towns have entertainment limits on what time they close, and we honor that and
Sure,
sort of and make them comply with it.
Okay. So the hours have been extended, and the activity that takes place at the venue. We now have liquor served at the venue. We have food served at the venue. There are numerous games that are taking place at the venue, simultaneously.
Sure, we approve all those. So
Yes, sure.
the operator would present to us a version. As you know, there are 20 different versions of poker.
Right.
And they always come up with new versions in Vegas to come up with a version of poker that attracts people. So they would present to us a breakdown. Here's how the game we expect to operate. Here's how the dealer works. Here's how we expect the flow to go, and we would approve that or deny it. Yeah.
So have we exhausted the potential revenue from gaming in New Hampshire? I mean, every time you open a new game, are we just getting the people that are already gambling another way to go to the new game? And I mean, how much growth potential do you think there is?
I can tell you this with a certainty approaching death and taxes. You've exhausted me. I have folks that I have the privilege of working with some of the most talented folks you can imagine. And I think they're getting to the point of exhaustion.
Yeah.
Just because the last 6 years has really been breakneck speed. I don't know what the answer to that is. It's a good question.
Well, you're constantly looking to develop new forms of.
I do it. So I look at that. I obsess about it, only because everything we've tried to do has been additive and not cannibalistic. And what I mean by that is, let me ask you a question. Can you guess on the biggest month? Taking into account that Massachusetts is a big customer of ours for sports betting, guess how many unique users we have in a month during the height of NFL season? In a population of 1.3 million, plus Mass is 2 million, plus is Vermont's 400,000, plus is Maine's 1 million. Take a guess.
I have no idea.
40,000 unique users. So to put that into context, in Powerball, we'll sell a Powerball ticket to around 600,000 adults in New Hampshire every year. So that's the delta of small pond, big pond. And so with sports betting, what we found is it's a very niche product. There are folks that love to do it, and we have some very wealthy people that do it. It's what they love to do. They don't have a problem. They come in and bet $1,000, $10,000, but that's like betting $5 for you and I. Mm-hmm. I know a couple of the folks our customers are exceptionally wealthy. And so the addition of that was virtually not touching anything else. It was just, there was a giant well to be tapped. We tapped it, and now the funds started showing up. Yeah. So you always look for those to that question as to what the next iteration is and what is. So like, for example, I'll make you a suggestion. If the lottery would offer internet poker, which is poker through your phone or your computer, which there are probably 50 illegal sites now operating in Antigua and Barbados doing this now, that the Justice Department doesn't have the energy to shut down because why bother? Another one's going to pop up with another website name. It's not worth the energy. If we were to offer that, which other states do offer now, Delaware, Nevada, New Jersey, it would be completely new money, a player base that exists now that would be happy to do it in a regulated market and knowing that the consumer protections we offer in place. That would be completely new money. Other than that, I wonder what the next frontier is, and I don't know. Only because the consumer, as it gets younger, their need for content is much faster. They need velocity. My kid will not wait 3 days for a Powerball jackpot. They just won't. They wait 3 minutes for something. Yeah. Otherwise, they move on. I have 2 teenage sons, and so their patience level is that of a gnat.
Yep.
And so, like they're playing video games on their phone at a level that is so. And you don't want to ever sort of you don't want to sort of monetize Halo or Doom or. I'm sorry, these are video games. Or I
figured they were. I don't play them.
Red Dead Redemption. But it's that customer exists there as they're getting older. Obviously, we're not selling to kids yet. But for example, there's an entire burgeoning sports market called esports, where players play on teams that are funded teams, professional teams, doing esports for money in competitions. And some jurisdictions, not us, will take action on that sport. Well, you can bet on this team to win a Call of Duty tournament versus that team or this player.
So how much of the gambling we have in the state today is online as opposed to going someplace?
It's an interesting number because we had 0 as of 5 years ago. Right now we derive around 70 million profitability from the computer and the mobile. It's around not quite half of it.
Yeah.
It's the hockey stick growth of where our revenue comes from.
Yeah.
And only because in many respects, like for example, during the pandemic, through your phone, through us, you could buy a Powerball ticket. And so you don't have to go to the store and risk COVID when certainly in the early stages it was really feared. And so you use your phone. Or you want to play sports, you don't have to drive out to a retail sports book, you use your phone to place a bet on a game. It's certainly significant.
Now we're always going to have illegal gambling.
Yes. Yes,
No matter how much the state has,
No matter
there's
how
always going to be.
Yes.
And at least theoretically, they can offer you better odds because they're not going to share it with you and the state's citizens, right?
They're not. No.
So how do you deal with that competition?
It's a good question. At some level, you try and offer a comparable product. But there are things I can't offer, in conscience, candidly, gentlemen. There's no law restricting us from offering credit to players.
Right.
But as a matter of just conscience, I've refused and we've refused to offer credit to players. It's not right. It's bad policy, and I'll say it to my grave. Only because if someone has money in their checking account, then that's money they have. But if you allow credit cards or debit or really debt, you're really going down a road that I'm not going to go down. I'm not. It's just it's so bad.
Right.
So that's something that the illegal market can offer that I can't offer, or really we won't offer. But by and large, we've done like I said, I've talked to my friends in law enforcement that I used to work with, and we've annihilated the legal market for sports betting. I mean, even we annihilated the Massachusetts market because we offered the same lines the illegal sports books did, and so I can go to New Hampshire, get the same market, good rates, far more products, because we offer, if you've ever seen the app, we offer any given time 37,000 wagers to be had at any moment on any sporting event on the planet. You want to bet Premier League soccer? We have it. You want to bet the Australian Open? We have it. You want to bet, Japanese fly fishing? I've got it. You want to bet British pub darts? We got that too. And I swear to God, we have British pub darts for one guy in Portsmouth who called and asked. But we have British pub darts.
These are not apocryphal; these are real things.
These are real things, and we the legislature granted us and we're thankful for that authority for risk management. So we employ a number of risk management principles as to all things. For example, we will accept larger wagers on NFL because they're the gold standard of process of controls. Their refs are, and we'll accept very, very small wagers on British pub darts.
Yeah. So all the games that you run are involved in it. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
In every one, is there some limit on the amount that can be bet?
There is. It can be breached. And what happens is every Saturday and Sunday, some guy named Charlie McIntyre will get a call or 2 or 3 or 4 asking for some VIP to breach the amount wagered. And so sometimes I say yes and sometimes I say no, and it's based on a number of factors. For example, there was a gentleman looking to wager, I think it was $250,000 on Formula One, and I said absolutely not. Just no, because it's an odd bet, and usually in any algorithm that governs sports betting, one of the things they're looking for is anomalies, anomalous betting. Like if you follow sports betting in college, there was a massive surge in betting for Arizona State about 6 years ago, basketball.
Right.
Massive. And what happened was the Arizona State basketball team, a number of the players were taking money from illegal sources, and they were shaving points. And of course, like kids do, they kept talking about it.
Sure.
And they told all their friends. And lo and behold, a bunch of kids from Arizona State sweatshirts show up in Vegas Sportsbook with their entire college fund. I'll take $10,000 on the Arizona State not to cover the spread. And so you saw this, and we track this.
Search.
We have a number of programs that track this. You saw this spike in Arizona State. You're like, all right, let's go visit them. And so you'll look for anomalous. So similar to those large bets, if it doesn't look anomalous in the universe of betting, I'll usually say okay. But in that kind of situation where there's $250,000 on Formula One, it was no, absolutely not. We're not betting that.
Well, apart from these breaches, which you occasionally authorize, I guess, on an individual basis, what is the top limit that can be legally wagered in New Hampshire, and on what means
So
that?
it's no more than, say, it varies by sport. So like I said, NFL is the gold standard, and it goes down from there. On NFL, it's no more than $50,000 on a single bet without my approval. And then that goes by sport. So college basketball is half that. Baseball is half that. So there's a grid that we visit and we reflect on every so often. And the customers at retail are very different than the customers on the phone. Phones are very small wagers, $10, $20, $30. Folks who show up bet 500, 1,000. They just show up. And
Sure.
it's a big thing to them.
Sure. So, Charlie, with the expansion of sports gambling, with FanDuel and DraftKings and so forth and so on, what's your perception? What's going to happen to the charitable gaming market when all of these other opportunities are available to the gambler, where the gambler doesn't have to be there?
Yeah, of course.
And the gambler gets to see his action on television, because everything's on television.
No question.
And you get to see the action all the time, and you're able to play. You're able to play the quarter. You're able to play half.
Sure.
Who makes the first shot?
Yeah.
So forth. All of these opportunities have expanded the gaming market.
Yeah, and also if you look at like our internet platform, we have scratch tickets you can buy through your phone now that are virtual, and we have them as low as 2 cents. Because there's no printing cost, there's no distribution cost, there's no collection cost, and so to us that doesn't matter. And so you're going to find and also, for example, I'm the chief regulator for the state, and I get intimidated walking into a poker room, and quite literally everyone there has answers to us, and I get intimidated. I think you're going to find it different. You're going to have to sort of find the next generation of poker players, because it is an intimidating game.
Yes.
To walk into a table and sit down with a bunch of folks who look like they know what they're doing, and if you don't, all you've been playing is with your buddies in your dorm room for nickels and dimes, you're going to get swallowed.
Right.
There's sharks in this chum.
Right.
And so I think that has I don't want to say it has a life expectancy, but certainly it has a natural limit because of the activity itself and the nature it is. Now, I mean, I'm a guy that will sit at a poker table and play cards. Certainly not in this state. That would be illegal if I sat and played a game that we regulate. But I think that's the next generation. Also, I mean, it's the strangest thing. Like my sons, they'll hang out with their friends virtually.
Yes.
And they'll play video games. They'll play Call of Duty and be goofing and laughing at each other virtually for 4 or 5 hours and think nothing of it. Whereas back in the day, where were all the bikes? Whose house were all the bikes in front of? Okay, that's where everyone's hanging out. Let's go there. And so you're going to find, I think, just a change of retail behavior of which gambling will get swept up in. I mean, it's a good question. I think about it all the time. I don't think it's my problem. I think I'll be long gone by then. But I think it's going to be sort of the digitization and almost the vaporization of the economy, particularly as relates to gambling, because anything you can vaporize, when is the last time you used a hotel key?
Right.
Literally just there's a Japanese retail
Actually,
chain.
this weekend at the Joe Dodge Lodge in Pinkham Notch, they had a hotel key.
There's a Japanese food chain that has outlets at train stations, and you get on a train, you get on the platform, and you look up, there's a virtual store. You pipe in your number, you hit a bunch of things, you arrive at your stop, and there's somebody there waiting with bags for you and drops you off. And there's no store, it's literally just the sort of the digitization of retail. And so, I mean, that's an inevitable, and so, I didn't invent it, but I think that's something that's going to happen over time. Like I said, we went from digital $0 to $70 million in profitability over 4 years.
Yeah. I'm looking at your vest there, Charlie, at New Hampshire Lottery, and it says, $2 billion for schools, public education? So that's been the case from the very beginning. This was to help out fund public education in New Hampshire. Are any of the other games tied to that particular use in terms of the revenues?
All of it. So
All of them are?
So, by the terms of the Constitution, actually,
Right.
our revenues, I think you must have been part of the Constitution Convention who did that.
Yep.
It was before my time here.
Yep.
Our line is simple. Revenues minus expenses equals return to education trust fund. And so we
So
transfer
that's true for every game you regulate?
every game we
Right.
regulate. And so
Okay.
$146 million profit last year. This year will be more. And so, for example, like a city like Manchester, that would mean around $15 million of their adequacy grant money. Like our money goes specifically, as I'm
Right.
told, to the to fund adequacy
Yeah,
grants.
yeah.
And so Manchester would get about $15 million of that. I can get you the exact number, but it's around.
Oh, that's good
It's
enough.
based on a population count, and so it's a significant funding mechanism. I mean, that's real money.
You know, whenever we talk about gaming, the problem comes up of people that get addicted to it, which is the big issue over Lou's favorite thing, the casino.
Yeah.
You know, that the slot machines are the most addictive form of gambling, and that was the big argument against it, and it seems to have prevailed up till now.
Yeah.
But even, other games people get addicted to, and I notice in most of the things that come up, the bills to do these things, there's also a provision that there'll be a certain amount set aside for addiction treatment and that sort of things. We'll talk a little bit about that.
Sure.
And is there anything you can do to help out that problem when you're, as you say, you're the bookie now?
I mean, certainly we're the sole funding mechanism for the New Hampshire Council on Problem Gaming, which I was happy to fund. I actually wrote the legislation that permanently funded the Mass Council on Problem Gambling when I was General Counsel of Mass. One of the strange things is that with the advent of technology, you actually improve your ability to treat folks. And what I mean by this is that we can see the activity for somebody using a phone or a computer. And so all of our platforms that use the phone or the computer have a self-exclusion function that is very visible. So if you see, and I'll be sure, so if you believe the literature, of the folks who gamble, around 1.5–2% have a problem. How you define problem differs, but they have a problem. So in a population of 1 million people, you're talking 20,000 people, saying adults, 1 million adults, 20,000 people have a problem. I found, because of my past experience as a prosecutor of organized crime, the folks who identify as having a problem are the most likely to get successful treatment. And so all of our platforms have, all the digital
Was that the
platforms.
1 or 1.5%?
No, that's the ones who literally succeed, not the 1.5%, but the
Okay,
succeed
okay,
of that
Right.
people, the 20,000.
I see, okay.
Those who know they have a problem and identify as a problem and take
Yep.
ownership that they identified. This quite literally the first step of AA. I have a problem. So we self-exclude. We have self-exclusion functions on our platforms where if you self-exclude, you're done. You can't play anymore. You're not welcome to go anymore. Also, we have operators, call center operators, who are trained to listen for buzzwords. So if somebody calls and says, listen, I can't make this month's mortgage payment because I lost, their account's disabled. And so, and they reach out and say, well, you use these words. Because the last person who wants those people's money is me. I'd rather everyone in the state give me $10 or $20 and play and call it a day. Like I used to play the lottery before I worked here. And worked in Mass. I would play the lottery. I'd play Powerball with my wife every week. So there's a number of things. There's also a hotline you can call in state. There are GA meetings in state, and those are getting up and running. It's a long process. It's never perfect, and it's never. It's bad because in some respects, folks who have money and lose it who can't afford to have it. And then at the very top of the pyramid are folks who win a fortune and then blow it because they don't know how to handle that much money. And I've seen both. And so you try and help the folks at the bottom who are like, I don't want your money, And then the top folks like, please keep your money. Like the horror stories are what make me, lose sleep at night.
Right.
Sure.
The Jack Whitaker for West Virginia who went bankrupt on $360 million. Mm-hmm. He literally lost. Now, mind you, Jack was not the smartest guy in the world. He got married, I think, 5 times with no prenuptial agreements. You think after the second one he would have figured that out. But, I mean, literally, can some lawyer just tackle him on the way to the altar like, Jack, can we just talk about, Sorry, I shouldn't get like that. I'm happily married. So,
So, when the casino bills were coming up, did you, on behalf of your agency, take a position on those?
so I was under. So the short answer is I didn't. My commission did, and I testified favorably on behalf of the bill and its passage, and certainly said first I didn't see any problems, and second.
But you did that on behalf of the commission, not.
Well, I did it out in the executive branch, quite literally.
Okay,
I was
okay.
the Governor Hassan brought me specifically in, and with Lucy Hodder, who the senator knows,
Yeah.
who was general counsel for Governor Hassan at the time.
Right.
I spoke, like I said, I spoke at a House Finance and Ways and Means hearing for, I think it was 5 hours. They set up the fiscal room jointly, and there were 45 of them asking us questions on 105 page piece of legislation, single spaced. I think it was size 7 font. And so we were asked questions for, I think it was 5 hours, and I asked the chair, "Can I get a glass of water or something?" So yeah, no, I grew up in gambling. My family used to own a seasonal license for a racetrack. It was called the Weymouth Fairgrounds. There was a horse racing just south of Boston.
Yeah.
And so I quite literally grew up there, and in the parking lot, parking cars with my parents.
Yeah.
And then I had a membership at the Turf Club at Suffolk Downs for years.
Yeah.
And so for me, I'm the guy that'll sit at the blackjack table for 6 hours. The math, I'm a nerd for math, and so the statistics and probability feeds me
that
like.
working, yeah.
And so yeah, and
Okay.
I've never lost more than $100. I've never won more than 500. So it's it's one of those like I'm the guy the house hates because I bet the way you're supposed to, you know.
Well, I think that what we've seen in New Hampshire, and as I say, I started in this business 50 years ago.
Yeah.
I've seen a progression here, and there are more gaming-related pieces of legislation today than in the last session.
Yeah.
Coming before Ways and Means. It's all about a level of sophistication.
Yeah.
And let's say a purification of the rules, and doing other things, creating, as I said, creating a level of sophistication, and in my opinion, it is what it is. And I think the real problem I see is now the onus is on you to moderate and to validate, supervise, and to make sure that there's honesty and integrity in the game.
No question.
And I think that's
It's
that's
my
the
job.
way to go.
No, it
Yeah,
is.
right.
And so one of the challenges we're going to face is, I think there'll be a contraction. I think the marketplace, if you were to ask me, like I said, as an expert in gambling, the marketplace has a number of gambling it can do, charitable gambling, that is X. I don't know what X is yet, but X isn't 5X. And I think there are folks who have in their head 5X exists. And so the point at which it becomes not profitable to do it, what does the state do? Does it change the rules, change the rate, make me do less? I mean, at the end of the day, folks don't like not making money at what they bought or what they are doing. And so what happens? I don't know. Like I said, and I don't know what the marketplace is, and I've said this to a number of folks, like what the market will support. I always call it the Loch Ness Monster theory, and everyone looks at me like I'm crazy. So the way in which they prove the Loch Ness Monster didn't exist is there's no food in Loch Ness. Nothing that something that big could live off of. And so similarly, there's not enough food that exists in a lot of these jurisdictions for everyone to live off of.
Right.
And so these facilities which they build they're going to go to a bank and go, hey, I need to borrow X, and they're going to go, show me your business plan, and they're going to say it's not viable. And so I think that's a day coming sooner rather than later. I don't know, not next month, but in the next couple of years.
Sure.
And certainly as a free market guy, we support the lottery. Everybody who wants to have a lottery license to sell Powerball tickets, we support. Sell them everywhere. If your business succeeds, it succeeds. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But we're all for points of sale.
Right.
So that's going to be a situation I think is going to happen the next 3 to 5 years. I just do.
Well,
You know, this has been fascinating, Charlie. Thank you for coming in and
Yeah.
giving me so much news and information I did not previously have. I just wanted to ask about, we were talking about the history of racing in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
So the Rock was such an institution here in New
100
Hampshire.
years, 100
100
years.
years, you know, it
100
was in the movies and everything, you know.
Yeah.
It was quite a thing. And then we had the Greyhound racing. Do we still have any Greyhound racing? Is that gone too?
It's
It's
gone.
gone.
It's
It's
long
gone.
gone.
Really?
Gone.
Yeah, it's been gone for a while.
Yeah. Well, I think Florida just wrapped it up.
I think they were the last place
The
that had
last
it.
place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Last place.
I was used to go to Taunton, Rain Taunton.
Rain
Yeah.
of Taunton, which used to run
Yeah.
the American Derby.
Yeah, no,
which
it's-
is a big race.
Our joke was that my buddies and I would do 178
Right.
My goodness.
because literally otherwise the dogs get blocked in and there's no jockey to steer them around.
So the racing these days is the historic racing that
Yeah,
Right.
you
and
can
really,
wager on.
and you're talking really the last place true horse racing lives is Florida. There's a number of tracks that are successful.
Yeah.
Kentucky,
Right.
Yeah.
and which is really a lifeblood of and then California.
California.
Yeah, Santa Anita is a big track. So
Santa Anita, Del Mar.
Del Mar.
Yeah, we still have it.
I mean, my favorite track still is Hialeah.
It's a beautiful place.
It's an absolutely gorgeous. It's a track
gorgeous
built
track.
by like the New York rich
Right.
Yeah.
for them to go to in the 20s, and it's the architecture is
I've
breathtaking.
never been there.
Yeah,
I'll have
it
to
is.
make a
Oh, it's
note.
beautiful.
And it's so if you remember I think it's the track where they have the flamingos.
Right.
You ever see Miami Vice where the flamingos fly
Yeah.
back and
Right,
forth?
right.
Their infield is a lake,
Yeah.
a large lagoon, and the flamingos fly across that. I think they're trained after the 7th race
Yeah.
to fly back and forth. And so I've always loved Hialeah. It's in a bit of a down neighborhood, but
Yeah, but look at where the Preakness is held. Talk about a down neighborhood.
No, to be
I
sure.
mean, that's a mess. But horse racing, I think has all but vanished in
Yeah.
very, very key
it has to be
areas.
subsidized now.
Right, it's got to be subsidized. You got to have the television. You've
Yeah.
got to have TV because the race has got to be televised.
I never did much of it, but I must say I enjoyed watching those animals. Are magnificent.
Oh, yeah.
It was a
They're great
wonderful,
athletes.
wonderful
They're great
thing.
athletes.
It's funny. I was on a Zoom call. I have a photograph. I have a very famous photograph in my office of Secretary of the Belmont. Secretary of the Belmont is the most famous photograph in all of horse racing.
Right.
The jockey Ron Turcotte.
Right.
This was the day that Pegasus existed because Secretary won the Belmont by 34 lengths
Right.
over who was the number 2 horse that year? I can't remember the name of the horse, but another super horse. And 34 lengths is absurd. It's like they're just running 2 different tracks.
Right.
And there's a moment Ron Turcotte turns around because he can't even hear anything. He's literally by himself. He's so far from the rest of the field. He doesn't hear the horses. And he turns around. There's a photograph, and somebody from I'm not going to say where, but a entity that does horse racing asked me where that photograph was. And I was like, you work in horse racing and you don't, it would be the equivalent of you work for the Bruins and I don't recognize that photograph of Bobby Orr in the air.
Right. Well, again, the process has evolved, right? An
Sure.
evolutionary process.
Yeah.
And the key is what's next. And when do you reach the point of diminishing returns? And just focus back on charitable gaming now has become an entity that charities are dependent upon.
Yes, no question.
They are dependent upon it.
Yeah.
So if there is contraction, then the pie gets sliced
Smaller,
thinner, and so
Yeah.
forth. And those who have depended on this for long periods of time come out on the short end.
Yeah, there's no question, and that's the case around the state. And
Yes.
it's based on the facility in question, and it really it's one of the rings we take personally. Is we want to make sure each operator does it right because you don't want charity A in a room to get $10,000,
Right.
and charity B to get $1,000.
Right.
It's just unfair. Only
Yeah.
because the operator's not very good at what they do. Or they had problems, or we had to fine them because of X, Y, or Z,
Sure,
or we had to
sure.
shut them down because there were minors playing. The last thing we want.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, we got to wrap it up, Charlie. I just want to thank you again for coming down.
Yeah,
I
Charlie,
learned
been
so
great
much.
to have you.
I
Yeah,
think New
please.
Hampshire's fortunate to have somebody like you oversee this
Oh, I'm
business.
fortunate. I'm fortunate.
Well,
mean,
I guess you like your job. So
Oh, I
that's good.
do. Yeah.
That's good. That's good, and very, very interesting. I'll be back next week, folks. Lou won't be here because it's the first week, Wednesday of the month, but I'll be back with Mike Farley I haven't discussed with them what we're going to do, but I am thinking about a subject which I think would be this status of public transportation in the city of Manchester. I was astonished to learn we don't have a downtown bus station anymore. They're turning it into a homeless shelter.
They closed it 4 years ago.
Yeah,
4
yeah.
years it's been
I know,
closed.
there's
Wrong place.
There's
Wrong place.
some real issues, but
Wrong
there's
lo-
no downtown
right,
bus station.
Right. Talk about the wrong
In the
location.
largest city in northern England. That bothers me.
right.
Anyway, okay. We'll see you next week with another edition of the Progress Report. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to check us out on YouTube. Watch the replays. See you next week.